So jumping into the material, first and foremost, my name is Stuart Hilton. I'm technical director with Sting Titans, and so I've been with the club now upwards of 8 years or so. And so yeah, that's me. About this webinar, we newly added these goalkeeper webinars this year. We want to make sure that they're no longer than 30 minutes in length, so we certainly won't go over that time frame. It's Friday evening. We want to make sure that you can all kind of go and enjoy that. But again, some very important information presented throughout. Open to all goalkeepers and parents within the organisation, and we'll again offer these twice each season. So the next one, kind of save the date if you like, March 20th is our spring sort of addressment. Here we're going to focus on goalkeeper distribution. So the goals and objectives, in a little bit more detail. Essentially, we want to again provide you with more education. We want to help you better understand the demands of the game at the highest level. Essentially, the sort of game that you play at U8 looks very different to U11, looks very different to U14. Even though it's the same game, essentially, the demands of the game continue to evolve and are very different. And so it's very important that for us as an organization, that our goalkeepers have an understanding of what the game looks like at the highest level. What's the end game? What are we working towards? What things can I be focusing my attention on, whether it's in my own training or training with my goalkeeper coaches? What questions can I be asking? What things should I be looking for when I'm watching film or games on the TV? Again, hopefully give you more insight into truly some of the intricacies at the highest level. Obviously, to raise the level of play, whether that's short term or long term, to promote improved decision making. Decision making a huge component of goalkeeping at the highest level, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And to better define the expectations for the Sting and Titans goalkeeper. What are we looking for? If you've got aspirations to play at those higher levels within the organizations, what are those coaches going to be looking for from you as a goalkeeper? And specifically for the purpose of this particular webinar, again, we'll be focused on goalkeeper distribution. So just a little kind of overview that kind of sets the scene for the conversation going forward here. This is kind of the USSF, US Soccer Federation numbering system. And so what you'll see is that the number 2 doesn't necessarily pertain to the number on the player's back. The number 2 role essentially is the right back. So obviously the goalkeeper is referred to as the number 1. So if you're playing in the number 1 role, you're the goalkeeper. If you're playing in the number 5 role, you're the centre back, or left centre back to be more specific. And so that's just a depiction of kind of when we reference certain numbers throughout the course of this presentation, this is kind of what we're alluding to based on kind of that 4-3-3 system. So here's the kind of the profile of a Sting Titans goalkeeper. We have it sort of broken up into technical components, tactical components, one being in possession, one out of possession. The physical demands, if you like, or the profile physically of a goalkeeper that you would essentially be looking for, and then the psychological aspect of the goalkeeper within the organization and what our sort of primary goals are in terms of development. So you can kind of see on a technical level, for example, we're talking about excelling in ball handling skills. Well, that's a relatively obvious thing for our goalkeepers, I would think. The ability to, pass accurately and use various range using both feet is probably something that's less emphasized. We often see the goalkeeper as the player that, keeps the ball out of the net, that makes the saves. Well, absolutely, that's a huge component of any goalkeeper and the makeup. But the game is evolving significantly in terms of how a goalkeeper now is part of the team in possession at all times in the game. And so the need for our goalkeepers to be comfortable and confident with their feet is just, again, becoming a highly desired quality when you're identifying players or when players are looking to make that transition again into the higher levels. So we're going to really touch on a lot of that in terms of the distribution with the feet, the ability to receive a ball effectively in terms of your first touch, um, and go beyond into the distribution using hands as well in terms of throws, punts, and goal kicks. So we'll get into a lot of that on a technical level. On the tactical side of things, we're going to be more focused on the in possession part of this. So the requirement to provide depth for the team, we'll talk about that in terms of what that means. The ability to support outside back and centre backs in possession. So not kind of being glued to the goal line, for lack of a better term, when the team is sort of building up in possession. It's the ability to consistently be in effective supporting positions. And that ties into recognizing when the need is there to switch the point of attack and step up and stay connected to the attack. And then effective use of the ball in possession, with the ability to clear the ball when the ball needs to be cleared. If the conditions suit, keep the ball, switch the point of attack, or play into various lines. And again, we'll sort of define those lines. What does second line mean? What does third line mean? And so on and so forth. And then that composure, being composed and reliable in possession. So being a goalkeeper that a defender feels confident that they can play back to, and they're not going to lose possession. They're not going to kind of miss kick and things of that nature. What are things that can help us be more composed and reliable, and the ability to look forward. So really the sort of emphasis today through the course, or this evening, but through the course of this webinar, is going to be focused on some of those technical pieces we talked about, and then the tactical implications of those techniques, specifically in possession. So this is kind of how our curriculum is defined as a club. We're specifically going to be focused on the attacking side, and of course for the goalkeeper, you're going to be mostly concerned with the build-up phase. So that's the area closest to our own goal, that starts the attack, essentially. So some of the technical considerations for the goalkeeper in this area of the field, of course, passing and receiving. Ball striking is going to be a huge component, which ties to passing in the sense of the way that you pass the ball, but it also pertains to kind of driving the ball over 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards in an effective fashion, maybe being able to bend the ball, chip the ball, hit the ball with some backspin so it lands sort of softly at the feet of a particular target. There's lots of different ways that you can strike the ball. And more than that, it's the ability to, at the highest levels, execute those things with both feet as well. And so, those requirements are not just there for outfield players, they're very much there for goalkeepers also. And then, of course, throwing, rolling, punting, and certainly turning with the ball as well. If you're looking to sort of switch the point of attack or escape from an oncoming forward who's maybe closed you down, having received the ball from a defender in any particular situation. So those things are certainly going to be commonplace for any goalkeeper. And I touched on kind of where should your focus be in this area. Well, you want to certainly be focused on improving your range. So if you're a player that can pass the ball 10 yards or a goalkeeper that can pass the ball 10 yards, then great. Can you now expand that to be able to hit that 20-yard pass, 30-yard pass, 40-yard pass? It's not just hitting the ball 40 yards. It's hitting the ball 40 yards into a very accurate area. And so that ties to the accuracy. How accurate can you be with that pass? Is it a pass that's hit to the player's front foot to allow the player to play forward in possession? Or, are you off by 2 or 3 yards that you're hitting the foot closest to you, which essentially forces the player receiving the ball to take multiple touches and slow the game down just to face forward. So there's really an accuracy element to where you're looking to improve. The ability to execute those things at speed. So sort of as that pressure is on rushing and on coming, can you execute it that little bit quicker and still maintain that level of accuracy? And of course, consistency is a huge piece too. Can you hit that 40-yard pass over and over and over, and not just sort of once and twice? Attacking considerations from a tactical perspective, I touched on some of them, but you're going to be involved certainly in all these elements. So providing depth underneath the back line, offering up support, being mobile across your box. So not just, again, being kind of central in front of your goal, consistently inside your 6-yard box. Are you able to sort of move with the play and stay connected to the play moving forward as the game develops into more attacking areas? Can you offer penetration in terms of breaking lines? And again, we'll talk about that. And then from time to time, improvising to solve a problem. But again, that's going to be less frequent for the goalkeeper, certainly, because we don't want to take risk in trying to beat opponents 1 versus 1, for example, using disguise and deception and things of that nature in that area of the field. So that's going to be few and far between, but it's definitely evident from time to time at the highest level. Counter attacks. So can you recognize the need for starting counter attacks, recognizing moments of transition and organizing your team appropriately, switching the point of attack, so moving the ball from the left side of the field to the right or vice versa, and then the value of maintaining possession at various points in the game. And so essentially what as you link back to these, you're being challenged to raise your IQ as a soccer player. You know, what is the right time to switch the point of attack? When is the right time to start a counter attack? When is the right time to possess the ball versus penetrate and try to move the ball higher up the field? So essentially you're addressing the who, the what, the where, the why, the when. You know, those things you should always have at the forefront of your thought processes as a goalkeeper. You know, when you're assessing situations, you know, who's in possession, what are we trying to accomplish, where on the field are we, why would we try and do that, when would we try and do that? You know, those sort of W's are going to help you start to really think about the game on a much deeper level from a tactical perspective. So again, we're going to focus on the build-up phase, and this is kind of the building up in our own half. Here's our attacking team shape. If we're talking about playing in a 4-3-3, and you and your team, you may play in a different system. We don't mandate a system of play per se within the organization, but the relationships are the same. So if you're playing with a back three, if you're playing in a back two or back five, depending on the format that you're playing in, whether it's 7v7, 9v9, 11v11, the relationships are always going to be the same. And my point with that is that you're always going to see triangles, you're always going to see diamonds, you're going to always see sort of options left and right within the course of the game. And so here's that first line that we talked about. Essentially, if you're playing into your two centre backs in this particular system, you're playing into the first line. If you're playing to kind of that 2, 6, or 3, that would be termed kind of that second line. The third line being into sort of the 8, or if the 10 comes a little bit deeper, you know, that would be essentially playing into that third line. The fourth line would be, again, that kind of next layer of the game. And then the fifth line into your front players, your 7, 9, or 11, or even possibly in behind the opponent's back line. That would be, you know, playing into that advanced area of the field. So visually, that just gives you a look at, okay, when we're talking about playing into the first line versus the fifth line, there's kind of a very different approach in terms of where we're playing on the field. So our build-up shapes specific to this area of the field now, just giving you a look at the players involved. And again, this is kind of 9v9 on the right, 11v11 on the left. Those are some of the pictures that you may or may not see. But long term, your team may not be at the point of executing these things in the way that you see it. That's okay. You're sort of working towards those concepts longer term. But this is where we want to get to. Again, big picture. So when you look at teams playing at the highest level in the 11v11 format, this is kind of the positioning that you'll kind of start to see on the field. So outside backs are going to be spread wide, centre backs are going to be opened up. The 6 is going to be kind of dropped into a position that essentially creates a diamond between you, the goalkeeper, your two centre backs, and the number 6. So yeah, that's kind of a common picture that you're sort of going to start to see, or certainly will see down the line in your soccer development. And these are just some adaptations of that. So if the opponent is playing really close to our goal, so they're sort of pushed up the field, you might see an adaptation where the 5 and 4 kind of drop even deeper. So that diamond is just kind of structured even closer to our goal. And you might even see an adaptation of it where you have kind of one side of the field that is open, and the other side of the field, so the 4 and 2 are kind of tucked across. So this is kind of a safer way to set up, from a building up perspective, because there's less space in front of your own goal. So some adaptations, some things to think about. The rule change this year obviously allows now for players to set up and play inside of the penalty area from a goal kick. So just an important adaptation to note when sort of viewing options within the field, and maybe even coaching your teammates within the game. You know that, hey, you can step inside of the box if they're not so aware of that. So if you've got a goal kick on the ground, the ball's just gone out, you put it down. Again, your teammates can be inside of the box, and you can very much sort of start to play. And you'll see some video of that here in a second as well. So here are some options and some considerations that you should be starting to consider as a goalkeeper, if not already. Some certainly simpler than others, some easier than others in terms of the execution. But we're going to give you kind of the full scope of distribution that you ought to be considering and working towards in your development. So here we're looking at distributing to the 5 or 4, so using your centre back essentially as the distribution option. So as you can see here, from the start point, the red team is maybe positioned a little deeper on the field, so there's space for our 5 and 4 to play. So that may be a viable option. And then from there, we're looking to create overloads around the ball. So if the 9 applies pressure, then maybe we can start to move the ball on into our 3, our 6, or even possibly our 8, depending on the angle of pressure. If, for example, the 8 and 10 on the red team start to rush forward and start to really apply pressure in this area of the field, the important consideration for you as a goalkeeper is that you adjust your angle to offer a support pass back from the 5 to where maybe now we can utilize the other side of the field where we've created some space. So not just kind of distributing the ball to the 5 and then being sort of done, for lack of a better term, instead actively supporting that pass and constantly being engaged in the game. So here's kind of an example of that. So the ball is just distributed into our 5, and then we've built the game up from there and started to advance the ball forward. So to just go back to that initial part, you can see here the 4 and the 5 both positioned inside of the penalty box. The goalkeeper distributing the pass short. You see the onrushing players at that particular point. And then now sort of space is created higher up the field as a result of kind of that onrushing pressure. Here we've got sort of option number 2 is kind of getting into that second line. So now through the movement, the 9 is kind of pushed on a little bit higher, and now we've bypassed that first line and played kind of a longer diagonal into the second line. And this is a key skill for you as a goalkeeper now, is being able to expand upon your passing range and being able to hit those types of passes a little more accurately. So in this particular instance, it's sort of like 30 to 40 yards, and it's hit, using the instep. And when we talk about the instep, it's kind of that top lace hole on the inside of your foot. So as you run your finger from your big toe, the end of your big toe, all the way up the bone that extends into kind of the ankle, you kind of hit kind of a little nub, if you like, or a raised part of your bone as you get closer to the ankle. And that's kind of the point of contact on the middle of the ball. So really trying to work to hit the ball in a driven fashion to where the ball isn't taking, 7-8 seconds to get there because it's so high up in the air, and it's sort of just traveling very slowly and looping in there and bouncing. It's driven in there to where it takes maybe 3 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds to arrive, and then the player that receives the ball is not under pressure upon arrival and can deal with it. So again, you'll see some examples of that in the video as we look ahead. But here's just an example of that kind of driven pass into the outside back. It's where now they can start to play and build the game up. So if we go back to kind of that start point, you'll see here that the red are positioned centrally. So the 4 and the 5, our two centre backs, are probably not viable options to play to in a sort of non-risky fashion. So instead, we bypass that area of the field and we take advantage of the wide area. So the question for us as goalkeepers is, can I hit that pass? Do I have it in my sort of locker to be able to hit that type of pass if the game demands it? And it's just kind of adding to your toolkit to be able to solve problems. Here's a slightly different example of using the outside back. This time it's a throw. So it's thrown into the outside back. And again, was it necessarily the right decision, the wrong decision? Those are all considerations for us. But instead of kind of hitting that ball in with the feet on that occasion, it was a throw. So option number 3, here we talk about getting into the third line. The third line essentially being the number 8 in the number 6 in this particular situation. So the 6 has kind of come into a deeper role to pick up the ball. And lots of things can materialize from this point. So the wide area is taken away. Over here, the 8 has put pressure to our 3. The centre backs are taken away. So the 9 has taken away kind of the 5 as a logical option. Our 4 is a risky option because the 9 is kind of in that vicinity to apply pressure. So that central channel is now kind of opened up. And now we've been able to distribute to our 6, who can now face forward and start to build the attack. So in this instance, he or she has been able to turn and face forward. But of course, as that ball is rolled out there or passed out there, the 10 may come rushing out. So here's just some footage from a pro game on this occasion where the centre back has played out to the 6, and you see immediately the on-rushing player here in white that has applied pressure to the midfielder, and we've gone back to the goalkeeper, who has then been able to bypass that pressure and play a slightly bigger ball. So the use of the 6, the central midfield player, to do one of two things: to either turn and face forward and start the attack themselves, or to lure the opponents into pressing the game higher up the field to then make space higher up the field that we can now take advantage of. So again, to see that, we lure the pressure higher. We've now made spaces slightly higher up the field, and now we can start to work the ball into those areas. Here we've kind of got the 4th line. So this now using the number 8, so a little bit higher again, getting the ball into higher areas of the field. Here we've got an example of that where on this particular occasion it's a throw, but you can kind of see that as the game transitions here, we've got pressured a little bit higher from the red, so we haven't quite established yet a shape as a back line that allows us to safely use our 4 or 5, our 3 or our 2. So instead, the ball is thrown a little bit higher into our 8, and now the game is linked up from there. So a viable option, because again, when you look at this picture, this player is not sort of in a position that is would be deemed high risk, because the pressure is positioned either more inside on the left side of the field as the red look at it, or they're higher up the field. So we can bypass that pressure and then get into a more advanced area. So here the choice of technique was again a throw, and the throw was sort of a flat throw that traveled quickly into that area of the field. The 5th line, here we talk about bypassing again. You can kind of see that the opponents in red have positioned themselves higher up the field. They're applying pressure to all of those first line options, second line option, third line options, and 4th line options. So now we're looking, it makes sense to bypass all of those options and get the ball into a more advanced area. Maybe our 7, 11, or even our 9, our centre forward might be the more logical option. And so here we've got an example at the professional level. Liverpool goalkeeper Alisson, and he quickly start to counter attack by hitting a ball into the 7. And you can see it from multiple angles here, how it's kind of that side on driven pass that gets the team immediately into a way more advanced position and attacking the opponent. And so a very high level technique. I'm going to show it just one more time here again, and just this isn't just punted forward, it's specifically hit into an area, into a player, onto the front foot to allow the team to start the attack. So if you're looking longer term about where you want to take your game, again, that's a technique that you really want to be trying to add to your toolkit to solve problems at any particular time. Here we've got kind of support for the back line. So in this case, our number 5, our centre back, is facing their own goal. And so what we tend to see a lot of is in these types of situations, maybe the ball is just kicked out of bounds. Maybe the ball is kicked back to our goalkeeper and the goalkeeper sort of kicks it out of bounds. Sometimes the ball is lost as a result. Maybe it's a bad touch or a bad kick that gives the ball immediately back to the red team. So the idea here is that you, in this situation, recognize it as a need to support your centre back because the 5 or the 4 is facing their own goal. They're under pressure, so they can't turn to face forward and play the ball forward. And instead of conceding to just kicking the ball out of bounds and being safe, can you as a goalkeeper start an attack for your team by supporting the player and providing a logical passing outlet. So here we go back to the goalkeeper, who then rotates the ball out to our 3. And instead of defending a throw in our half of the field because we've kicked it out of bounds, we've instead now started an attack for our team. So here's just kind of a visual of that. So the ball kind of gets played over the top, pressured on the centre back. So obviously the centre back can't turn and start an attack and play forwards. They're under pressure. We play to our goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper has the ability to calmly just play the ball out to the outside back and again start an attack for the team. So here we've got a switch of play via the goalkeeper. So the 5 is in possession. The red team have shifted to close that side of the field. So now is the goalkeeper again available, making themselves available, and B, technically gifted enough to receive that ball and rotate the ball to the other side of the field quickly, efficiently, to now start to take advantage of the space on what we would term the weak side of the field at this point, because the red team have been forced to shift over to the left side of the field. So here we're going to see kind of a series of clips. The switching of the play will be part of it. But it kind of shows a number of those different types of distributions. So you've got kind of that into the 5th line. Here you've got it kind of into the 2nd line, where we've been able to pick out a teammate. Again, kind of a driven pass into the 2nd line. Here you've kind of got that switch of play, playing the ball out to the opposite side of the field. Here you've got a throw into our midfield, sort of that 3rd line. Here the composure to kind of lift the ball over. A punt that again picks out a teammate. It's not necessarily just blasted forward. Here we've lured the players to one side of the field before then switching the point of attack to start the attack. Again, so numerous different sort of distributions. Lots of range is visible here in terms of the different types of passes that are able to be executed and the level of accuracy that's associated with them. The use of both feet. So there, that particular goalkeeper used the left foot. Here he's using the right foot. So real good visual of kind of that expanded range of where we need to kind of take our distribution as a goalkeeper. So some considerations with all of that, risk versus reward. Obviously, we all recognize the risk associated with a turnover close to our own goal. So in ideal circumstances, in a game situation, we don't want to turn the ball over in front of our own goal. We don't want it to result in a goal against us. I think that's fairly obvious. If you haven't yet developed that ability to sort of play in that fashion and hit those types of balls, then maybe the training environment is the time to do it. Maybe the time at home is the time to really try to expand on your range to where you can get more comfortable and confident in playing those types of passes and involving yourself in the game in that type of way. Additionally, if you're, 4-0 up, 5-0 up and late in a game, maybe you can take some more risk. Maybe you can try one of those types of passes and see how it plays out. If you give up a goal at that particular point, you recognize that that wasn't something that you had hoped for. But the score was really out of sight, and we can live with it because we're trying to add those things to our game and kind of develop that aspect of our game. And then again, can we adapt as needed on game day? So the opposite to that is maybe we're 1-0 up with 5 minutes to go. Well, we absolutely don't want to take any risk at that particular point because we want to see the game out and manage the game accordingly. So you may not take risk at all and instead, put the ball into areas where we're just sort of managing the game. So there's aspects of game management that we all, will start to think about and mature with as we move through our development as goalkeepers. Goalkeeper, you must view yourself as the 11th player. You're not just simply a player that keeps the ball out of the net. You're a player that ought to be engaged in the game consistently at all times when the team is in possession, constantly offering yourself a support, and that could be to play back to and to actually involve yourself in the game with the ball, or it could simply be through communication in keeping the players engaged and understanding what their options are. And what their shape ought to be. Attitude and mentality, you must become comfortable and confident in all aspects of supporting the play with your feet. So again, something to really strive for, but you only become more confident and comfortable if you have practiced those techniques, if you've put the work in to know that when you do engage in the game and receiving the ball, that you're going to be able to execute. So those sort of things go hand in hand. You have to put the practice in. Shape, recognize your role in providing depth to the team and supporting underneath. So again, as the ball goes into your outside back, are you moving outside of the width of your goal to offer up a logical supporting angle, one where you can be found? Or are you sort of hidden away on your goal line and not necessarily engaged in the game through effective movement? Reading opponents, constantly reading and recognizing where opponents are positioned to make the right decision. So again, back to those examples earlier, if the opponent is really pushed high up the field, then it doesn't make sense to shorter passes into our 4-5, our 2 or our 3, because they're under immediate pressure, and we're putting ourselves at risk of losing possession and maybe giving up a goal close to our own goal. So those passes are logical when the opponent is maybe further away from our goal. If they're pressed up high, maybe we're looking to hit those second, third, fourth, and fifth lines. And I talked about the game management aspect in terms of, what is the state of the game? Do we need to be more patient? Do we need to possess the ball? Do we need to really slow the game down? Or is there a need for urgency to speed the game up and get the ball forward to try and maybe get back into the game? So really connecting with the conditions, I think, is where the advanced goalkeepers are able to to really impact the game. So that's everything I had. I hope it was beneficial to you all. This will be recorded and distributed and available for up to a week. But if you do have any, comments or questions, feel free to shoot me an email. You can also, of course, ask an abundance of questions of your goalkeeper trainer. I strongly encourage you to do that as well. So have a great evening, best of luck, and talk soon.